Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, preemptive like. Let's learn. TLDR News EU. 3 ways to maybe force Russia into a ceasefire. Okay, well, one thing could be stop acting like you're going to leave so easily, and then maybe Putin won't think that he can do whatever he wants. Put the ball in his court. Let's go.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Over the past few months, it's become overwhelmingly clear that Putin is the main obstacle to peace in Ukraine. While Trump has been able to push Ukraine into accepting a hypothetical ceasefire, he's been unable to do the same with Putin, despite numerous concessions. And on Tuesday, Bloomberg reported that Putin is now demanding the 4 oblasts that Russia claimed in 2020.
Why wouldn't he do this? Or why would he do anything if he sees you in Trump in the USA fighting with Zelensky and seemingly being very close to just saying, forget it, you're on your own, whatever happens, happens? If you're Putin, that I would just sit back and be like, nope, no deal. No deal. In fact, give me more stuff.
Even though Russia doesn't actually control much of this territory. This has given way to a sort of negotiating standstill. Trump is basically out of proverbial carrots, but Putin is still saying no. So in this video, we thought we'd try our best to figure out how to actually get Putin to the negotiating table and ultimately negotiate peace with Ukraine. Who is the most influential person in the world? Well, with your help, we've put together a full ranking. Learn the top 10 in the video linked below, or pick up a copy of our magazine for the full list. So let's start by motivating the premise and explaining why it looks like Putin is now the main object to any sort of peace in Ukraine. While Zelensky originally resisted Trump's calls for a temporary ceasefire in March, he was forced into a swift U-turn after the US temporarily withdrew military support and intelligence sharing. Unfortunately for Trump, Putin quickly scuppered any deal, first by insisting that the ceasefire be limited to energy infrastructure and the Black Sea, and then by retrospectively adding a whole load of impossible conditions. Negotiations promptly collapsed, retrospectively adding a whole load.
Energy and Black Sea ceasefire, Ukraine to fully withdraw from annexed territory, no NATO membership for Ukraine, demilitarization and halt military aid, recognition of annexed territory, lift Western sanctions on Russia. So basically, recognize all of the things I've gained so far, still don't let Ukraine go into NATO. So basically, recognize what I do, and then give me another few months so I can attack again, and then ask for another deal. If any of this other stuff happens, this one can't be part of it, logically. If you believe this is part of it, then you're just wanting the next round of invasion, you know?
Possible conditions.
What do I know? Let me know if you think I'm wrong, obviously.
And then by retrospectively adding a whole load of impossible conditions. Negotiations promptly collapsed, and in April, Trump gave up on the idea of some sort of temporary ceasefire, and instead went straight for a more comprehensive, permanent deal. To this end, Trump offered the Kremlin a ton of proverbial carrots, including de facto recognition of Russia's control over Ukrainian territory in the east, de jure recognition of Crimea, the withdrawal of sanctions, economic normalization between Russia and the US, Ukraine's exclusion from NATO, and a guarantee that the US wouldn't be involved in any post-war security.
That's just the icing on the cake, saying invade again. Guys, I'm still learning this stuff, so sometimes I feel like I'm coming across as more confident than my knowledge should allow. So if I'm saying anything wrong, then call me out on it for sure. But so de jure recognition, or so de facto recognition
control over Ukraine
of annexed territory, and de jure of that annexed territory, de jure recognition of Crimea. So why
territory in the east, de jure recognition of Crimea?
Why even include this? If you were, I thought the whole thing about this is the term that I feel like I know again and again, and then I think I learned something, and then I think I don't know what it means again. If you're asking for territory to be recognized, then aren't you asking for de jure recognition? I thought the whole point of de facto recognition was that you control this area, but it's not recognized by other people. So
the withdrawal of sanctions, economic normalization between Russia and the US, Ukraine's exclusion from NATO, and a guarantee that the US wouldn't be involved in any...
Oh God. And this is another crazy thing here, is that, okay, Ukraine excluded from NATO. So forget this one exists right now. Get off my screen. I would ask, okay, if you're doing all of this for Russia and you're still saying that Ukraine won't be in NATO, then what is going to be the repercussion if Russia invades again? Right? That's what I would ask. And then this point comes up.
Guarantee that the US wouldn't be involved.
Nothing. So what I'm so confused. What? You can have everything you want. We'll pause the war. And if the war starts again, we won't get involved. So it seems like you're giving Putin everything he wants.
Any post-war security guarantee. This apparently wasn't enough for Putin, who continued to assault Ukraine, demanded that Ukraine be demilitarized, ruled out European involvement in any post-war peacekeeping force, and suggested...
Short of just recognizing the entirety of Ukraine as Russian, what else could Putin ask for there? You know? That's everything you should want, unless you...
Zelensky...
Okay, I'm pausing too much.
...would need to be replaced before serious negotiations.
My God.
Demanded that Ukraine be demilitarized, ruled out European involvement in any post-war peacekeeping force, and suggested that Zelensky would need to be replaced before serious negotiations. On top of all this, on Tuesday, Bloomberg reported that Putin was demanding full control over the 4 oblasts that Russia claimed via sham referenda in September 2022, despite the fact that Russia doesn't actually control all this territory, and that Putin previously suggested he would accept a freeze along the current front lines. This all suggests Putin essentially believes Russia has the upper hand on the battlefield.
Or it could mean that Russia sees the alliance between NATO and Ukraine, or the US and Ukraine, as very shaky, and so why not just up the ante a little more just to see what else you can get, you know? It doesn't necessarily have to mean that he thinks he just has such an upper hand militarily, right?
And that this looks unlikely to change anytime soon, given Trump seems set on winding down support for Ukraine, and Europe lacks the political unity or industrial capacity to escalate, at least in the short term. Refusing negotiations has also served Putin pretty well so far. Every time he said no, the US just comes back with another carrot. Nonetheless, at this point, Trump is running out of carrots, which raises the question, what, if anything, can actually be done to force Putin to a deal? Well, as we see it, there are 3 big sticks available. The first and most obvious is to escalate military aid to Ukraine. This is something that Trump actually threatened in a Fox News interview in 2023, when he said that he'd tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot more than they ever got. Nonetheless,
okay.
At the moment, Trump doesn't seem keen on this idea, and has insisted on numerous occasions that supporting Ukraine is bad value for the American taxpayer. One way around this would be for Ukraine to actually buy the weapons off the US, which would both guarantee value for money and help with Trump's stated project of reindustrializing America. Now, obviously, Ukraine doesn't really have any money at the moment.
I understand that countries need to look after these things and look after their own interests, but it's unsettling seeing just how one-sided the current administration sees that. As in, like, it seems like they have no consideration of the greater geopolitical consequences of Russia steaming over the rest of Ukraine and succeeding in their overall military goals. And it's just about money. And that would make me extra terrified if I'm Ukrainian, because if it's only about money, then who's to say Putin wouldn't just give you a deal that might even give you more than Ukraine would give you? So yeah, the lack of greater stability around the world and just focusing on what you can get out of it is very worrying.
But these purchases could either be financed with support from Ukraine's European allies or via some sort of loan from the US, perhaps akin to the foreign military financing direct loans that the US recently agreed with Poland to finance the purchase of billions of dollars worth of Abrams tanks, Apache helicopters and Patriot air defense batteries, all as part of Poland's massive military buildup. Nonetheless, this might be a difficult sell for Trump politically, given his base isn't too keen on Ukraine, and this would very much imply that his peace negotiations had essentially failed. On top of this, it would risk an escalatory response from Russia. The second option would be to bring down global oil prices. As we've mentioned in previous...
I think a lot of Trump's base doesn't like Ukraine because he doesn't seem to like Ukraine himself. And so I'm sure a lot of more conservatives, isolationists don't care about Ukraine and maybe don't like Ukraine because they feel like they shouldn't be there. But a lot of people, I think, just kind of follow Trump's perception towards the subject, and I don't think Ukraine is immune to that.
Videos. The second option would be to bring down global oil prices. As we've mentioned in previous videos, sanctions on Russia have been less effective than the West originally hoped, in large part because Russia has still been able to find buyers for its hydrocarbons. While Russia has had to sell its oil at a discount, this discount has shrunk over time, and global prices have been high enough for Russia to turn a healthy profit. This all suggests that the only way to put real pressure on the Kremlin's finances is to bring down global oil prices. Now, Trump has already sort of done this by damaging the global economy, which has reduced demand and brought prices down from about $80 a barrel to nearer $65. But he could push prices down even further by releasing oil from America's strategic petroleum reserve. This might sound like an improper use of the reserve, but Biden did it in 2022 and 2023, and it worked surprisingly well. In short, Biden released oil from the reserve to stabilize the market and bring down prices after Putin's invasion.
So to make it less... Okay, that makes sense. I'm kind of just repeating this for my own sake. So if you make Russia's discounted priced oil seem less... I understand. Okay. You lower the overall value and then you don't... It's not as much of a... I get it, okay? I get it, I think.
And then started refilling the reserve when prices fell a bit in late 2024.
Like, oh wow, if I'm China, your oil prices are like 50% less than somewhere else. The risk of me doing deals with you, that's a large reward. But as the prices get closer, then it's like, is it worth even getting oil from you anymore if I'm saving, 30 cents a barrel, or I don't know, I'm making up a number.
Not only did this successfully...
That was for myself, not really me trying to explain anything.
The reserve when prices fell a bit in late 2024. Not only did this successfully stabilize global prices, the US also turned a tidy profit. While Trump might not be able to turn a profit, this shows he could put more downward pressure on prices, which would also bring down inflation in the US. Alternatively, Trump could lean on the Saudis to produce more, or rush through a deal with Iran, which, assuming it involves sanctions relief, would allow Iran to sell more oil on the global market. The third and final option is China. China has emerged as a sort of economic and diplomatic lifeline for Russia, buying up its oil and selling lots of stuff that Russia wouldn't otherwise be able to get its hands on. Russia and China have also become sort of anti-American allies, with China often backing Russia at the UN and parroting Russian talking points in official statements. Nonetheless, China is also clearly uneasy about Russia's war in Ukraine. Obviously, the war is bad for global prosperity and stability, but China is also very much opposed to any redrawing of international borders, in part because it sees this as a threat to the so-called One China principle.
Okay. Seems a bit...
i.e. in part because it sees this as a threat to the so-called One China principle, i.e. the idea that there is only one China, including both Taiwan and the mainland, which is why China has consistently expressed support for Ukraine's territorial integrity. While it's hard to see Trump persuading China to put pressure on the Kremlin, given the dire state of US-China relations, the EU might have more luck. China is clearly trying to peel Europe away from the US.
I mean, I was saying that about China because of China's like 7-dash line and stuff, but I mean the USA has been threatening Canada and Greenland and Panama and Mexico, so it's not exactly, the U.S. isn't exactly a good one to point out something like that. So,
both for political reasons and because China sees the EU market as a potential replacement for the US post-tariffs. The EU might be able to leverage this to force Beijing to push Russia into ending the war, although a closer EU-China relationship would push the EU away from the US. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around.
that's an interesting point. Just kind of like cutting America out of the deal and just being like, all right, forget America. China, seeing Europe's demands as something worthy of taking seriously if they're going to switch market more towards China. And that could be something that could work out. That makes sense to me, I think.
Although a closer EU-China relationship would push the EU away from the US. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around you. Luckily for us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, shares this same commitment.
Very great video. Really great video, guys. I said most of what I wanted to say throughout the video. I kind of got it off my chest. I don't have many other things to say. The main thing I would say, I'm going to watch through this sponsor. So main thing I would say is that offering you Russia all of these things without security guarantees is just asking for another invasion down the line, and maybe one where Russia thinks that Ukraine won't get as much support that time. So let's watch through this. If you're interested,
math, science, programming, data
sure
analysis, and AI are designed to help you learn by actually doing, rather than asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. For instance, each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. This helps you build your critical thinking skills and ultimately become a better thinker. Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you establish a strong foundation in algebra, then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen.
Great, brilliant. If you're interested in that, you learned it here, guys. Make sure to use the /TLDR. Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. Calling me out if I said something that was wrong or you disagree with. Answering questions. Any comments at all. Love to see them. You guys are always awesome down there. Hopefully I'll see you next video. Keep on learning. Bye, guys.